Ladies and gentlemen, we are excited to welcome you to the inaugural Governance Happiness panel discussion. It is fabulous to see Dubai School's principals joined by school owners and members of governing boards together this morning. My name is Metha Ali from KHDA, and I will be your MC for the day. I hope that you have had the opportunity to settle in, connect with one another, and also make some new friends. A big thank you goes to our friends here at the Emirates Aviation University for hosting us today. I'm sure that you have seen the carnival in the lobby just outside and are feeling the buzz and energy, are wondering what is this all about? Well, you are part of What Works, KHDA's key education engagement activity.
In 2012, we asked a question: what if? What if private education meant not competition, but collaboration? What if we concentrated not on problems, but solutions? What if we shared our successes and strengths? What if between us we created an alignment of strengths so that weaknesses became irrelevant? Dubai's private education sector is one of the most diverse in the world. 173 schools offer 17 different curricula to students from 183 different nationalities.
The diversity of everybody's experiences and bringing in different ways of looking at educational practice across the world, and we've got that richness of the whole world in one place.
Diversity like this inspires positive practice across Dubai's classrooms every day. What if there was a way to spread this positivity to all teachers, all classrooms, all schools? These questions gave rise to What Works, a series of free practical events created by educators for educators.
Teachers standing up, talking about operating workshops with other teachers on the subject of what they do in their classrooms. By sharing and by giving, you grow yourself as well as helping to grow other people. And that is what makes What Works special and unique.
It's given me a network of people that I can reach out to as I have questions and as I want to engage in a conversation, which will, I think, help me be a more effective and successful leader.
Since 2012, more than 12,000 teachers and principals across Dubai have attended 600 sessions at 24 What Works events. Joining them, more than 800 students and 400 community partners have made What Works a truly collaborative movement.
And What Works is really a window to all that, and it gives professionals from classroom teachers through to middle leaders, through to senior leaders, the opportunity to see just what great stuff is being delivered across Dubai.
As soon as you walk into a What Works, I think it hits you. Right from what's in the lobby area to the well-orchestrated sessions that happen to the external speakers who come in.
It's brought schools together and teachers together and students together in a way that I'm not aware of has been done elsewhere.
You give me even one tip from an expert colleague or a brand new teacher that has new learning and new science in that way, and my teaching is reinvigorated too, even at my advanced teaching age. So yeah, the benefit is teachers get to keep being learners.
One of the best memorable occasions for the students. It brought in happiness, it brought in self-respect, it brought in self-esteem.
All sessions are recorded digitally and graphically and then shared across social networks so that teachers who can't attend What Works can still learn What Works. Each What Works event is based on a theme that appeals to teachers across all subject areas. What Works has created a compassionate ecosystem of schools, teachers, parents and students who together build a better, happier education sector in Dubai. By working together and joining hearts and minds, Dubai's education community has transformed What If to what is.
So now you should know the link to the sunflower plant that you all received this morning. We all know that the sunflower, it always follows the sun. And we are here always following the what works in order to get more energized and have fun and learn from each other. If you have not guessed already, the theme of the what works of today is happiness. And why happiness? Simply because happiness makes sense. Happy people learn more, retain information better, and are better learners, and they are also better teachers. And we hope that you will have the chance to engage in the awesome learning and sharing that takes place here today. This morning, we will discuss how positive leadership exercised by principals and governing boards help to advance the quality of schools in Dubai. Because we all know that happiness starts from the top. And to move the discussion even further, we are fortunate to be joined by international experts who will share their thoughts on how school governance can be enhanced to support meeting UAE agenda targets. Our visual harvesters here in the morning, Layla and Afrah, are also joining us today on stage to graphically record today's session. Something we do for each What Works session. And also, you will have the opportunity to see how visual harvesting is a great way to communicate information and knowledge. The artwork will be displayed for you to see later in the day outside and will also feature on the What Works website. We are also joined by Baranda from our own high school, who is our well-being keeper and will keep us on the wellness track.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brinda, and I'm your well-being keeper for today. Science tells us that sitting is the new smoking. So every 20 minutes, I will be back to look after your well-being. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to introduce James Mullen, co-founder of WhicSchoolAdvisor.com, the go-to site to parents seeking quality information about UAE's private schools. A seasoned speaker on the education scene, James' experience will offer valuable insight to impartial analysis of how parents see Dubai school options and with a background in global communication and PR. James is a vibrant and informed addition to the What Works Governors panel and will be moderating the discussion today. Welcome, James Mullen.
Wake me up before you go. Don't leave me hanging on like a yo-yo. Wake me up before you go. I don't want to miss it when you hit that high. Wake me up.
And welcome to today's discussion. When I spoke to Dr. Abdullah about today's session, I put a question to him. I said, what are you looking to achieve here? And what he said to me was quite simple. He said, I want to begin a discussion. So to help us begin this discussion on school governance, I'm delighted to welcome some eminently qualified people. Barnaby Lennon. Barnaby is the chairman of the Independent Schools Council in the UK, and part of his role includes overseeing the Association of Governing Bodies of Independent Schools. He has been a governor of 14 schools. Barnaby began his teaching career at Eton, where he taught for 12 years. He was appointed headmaster of Harrow in 1999, before taking up his position at the ISC in 2011. He has published a number of successful textbooks for schools, including London in the 1990s and Geography, Fieldwork and Skills. He is often approached by the media for his views on education and appeared in the ITV documentary series Harrow's School on the Hill in 2001. He was named Tatler Headmaster of the Year in 2005. Welcome, Barnaby Lennon. Steve Munby. Steve Munby is Chief Executive Officer of the Education Development Trust, a UK-based charity which works around the world to help improve schools and school systems. This varies from direct-to-school improvement initiatives to helping governments shape educational policy on a national scale. Steve has been with the Trust since November 2012. He has almost 20 years of consultancy and governance experience, and in his own words, is passionate about unleashing the greatness of school leaders. Please welcome Steve Munby. Cameron Staples. Cameron Staples is President and CEO of the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, NEASC, a position he has held since 2011. NEASC is an independent, not-for-profit organisation that works with more than 2,000 public and independent schools, technical institutions, colleges and universities in New England. It also works with international schools in more than 65 nations worldwide. A strong advocate for accreditation, Cameron has a wide breadth of educational and legislative experience. He is an attorney and a former Connecticut State Representative. Welcome, Cameron Staples. And finally, I'd like to welcome our host for today, Dr. Abdullah Al-Karam, Chairman of the Board of Directors and Director General of KHDA. Dr. Abdullah is responsible for the quality and growth of Dubai's private education sector, including early learning centres, schools, universities and training institutes. Dr. Abdullah is a board member of the National Qualifications Authority of the UAE Federal Government, as well as United Arab Emirates University. He is a board member of the social sector, Government of Dubai, and is a member of the Higher Committee for Protection of the Rights of People with Disabilities. He is also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Dubai Future Foundation and the Mohammed bin Rashid University of Medicine and Health Sciences. Dr. Abdullah holds a PhD in Computer Engineering from the University of South Carolina. Please welcome Dr. Abdullah Al-Karam. So, Dr. Abdullah, I introduced you. I said about 2 weeks ago we had a conversation to talk about this particular session, and you talked about the beginning of a conversation. So the immediate question is, why now?
Well, assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. Let me start by thanking our friends who flew in this morning from the US and UK. And I would also like to thank you all, our friends in the auditorium, for taking the time. I know it's a busy schedule, I know busy season, but I think making it here, it's making us very happy to start with. I think following on James' point is, we had a discussion and said in the last 9 years, that's how old is KHDA. We have been working very closely with the schools. And we have found it extremely useful when we use the authority of KHDA to convene people, to convene friends, and to talk about topics and have a very healthy dialogue. Well, you know us very well, and you know us, we didn't start that way 9 years ago by sending our inspectors to you. But we grew up and we learned. And we learned the way we get on the business is to involve everybody. And I mean everybody, on the right level of discussions. And I think our journey for the last 9 years have taught us a lot. We have learned. And we have also involved most of the stakeholders we have in Dubai and in UAE also. We have the What Works that has participation of everybody. We have the various platforms and instruments The one thing that we sort of kept till now, until this hour, is a discussion with you and a dialogue about governance of schools. Governance plays a major role, and I think in the past has not been activated in the way that it should have been. But that's good because we have something to start. I think also to keep in mind that UAE has an ambition national agenda to be in the top performing 15 countries in TIMSS and 20 in PISA, among other agendas. And we're getting close to that target in terms of date-wise. Now, we all need to work together to achieve that target for UAE to celebrate its 50th birthday. And we know we cannot do that alone. We need every and each one of us in this room and outside to be part of delivering the national agenda. The role or the governors or the board in different format, we've been having discussions. And I personally had some discussions prior to this session with some of you in the room here. And I can tell you the more than 9 reasons why it won't work. Because they were more or less the same thing, the reasons why people thought inspection won't work. And there are, I mean, your classical reasons are, well, this is a private schools, or this is a profit or non-profit schools. Or if you take non-profit, is it an embassy school or charity school or philanthropic? Or if you take profit, it is company, it is an individual, it is publicly listed company, and the list goes on. Or if we add the curriculums of the 17 different curriculums, or if we add, so you see my point. I can go on with this. I know more than 9 reasons why it won't work. But I know one reason why it should work. Because we are here on what works, but we are having a common purpose, which basically we want UAE to celebrate its 50th birthday and to be in the top performing nation academically, and we should all play a vital role on that one. And again, and I think Mark said, it is the start of a discussion or a dialogue, it's healthy. We haven't had this before, in this scale, or this international presence, which actually sometimes makes you happy because you feel curious of what the guys will say around here. And let's focus on the positives, and I think we can build from now on sort of a roadmap of how these discussions will carry on.
Great. Barnaby, turn to you. You've been governor of 14 schools. Can you just sort of outline to us why is governance necessary, and what difference does it make to the functioning of a school?
So, it is perfectly possible to imagine a good school functioning without any governance. But you're taking a risk if you do that, because you're relying 100% on the principal getting everything right. Sometimes they'll do that, but often they won't. And that's where governance can be helpful. Governors are essentially a group of experienced and skilled people who can add quite a lot to the monitoring and the quality of what a school does. Governors, of course, appoint the head. That's arguably their most important job. But once they've done that, then the main role of governors, certainly in the United Kingdom, where virtually all private and certainly all state schools have governing bodies, their job is to monitor the school's performance and suggest ways that the principal can improve the school without interfering in the day-to-day management of the school. And a good governing body, with people who know what they're talking about, can make a big difference. So, for example, most good governing bodies in the United Kingdom would have other head teachers on that governing body. They might be retired, they might be the heads of feeder schools, but those people know what they're talking about. They have a lot of experience in data, what makes a good school. They know about specific things like child protection and health and safety. They understand about inspections, and they can reassure the other governors that the principal is doing the right things and give a lot of helpful and realistic advice. In a private school, you certainly have at least one governor who knows a lot about finance. You might have governors who are lawyers, who are experts in building and project management or human resources. All of these people inevitably can add a great deal as long as the governing body is constituted properly and each governor has a role and indeed the role of the governing body is clearly understood. But I can tell you from my experience and the experience of thousands of schools in the United Kingdom that a good governing body can make all the difference.
Interestingly, when we were having our discussions in the room prior to this, we had a bit of an Atlantic split here in terms of how organisations are governed. You were talking about, Barnaby, a very specific roles for governors, and also principals being involved and students being involved. So I'd like to turn to you, Cameron, to talk about, give us a picture of what you think good governance looks in the US and how it may differ from what we were discussing in the UK.
Well, thank you, and I don't think that I would disagree with anything that was just said about the principles of good governance. I think, certainly we have several models in the U.S. Like we do in the UK. We accredit public schools as well as independent schools, international schools, and colleges and universities. So there are different models of governance. And certainly here in Dubai, we know there are quite a few proprietary schools, which is not a typical feature of our domestic independent schools in the U.S. But I do think in overarching principles, I agree that their role is a critical part of making sure the school is consistently operating within its mission, that it provides leadership, strategic leadership to the school, as well as fiduciary leadership. I think that's one issue that we're emphasizing even more for our reviews of boards, is to make sure that they are not just, although critically important, overseeing the principal or the head of school, but also that they are a body that thinks about the long term for the school and making sure that its strategic direction is established. I would also agree that a real critical feature of good governing boards is that they very clearly understand their role. There is a delicate balance, I think, in a proprietary school, particularly between the role of the owner, the role of a governing board, and the role of the head of school. Done properly, they each serve a critical function. Done improperly, they get in each other's way and they can interfere with a highly functioning school. So I think at its outset, one of the things that we certainly take a very serious look at when we accredit a school is making sure that the roles are clearly defined, well understood by all parties, and that each contributes in a manner that advances the success of the school. Clearly the principal or the head is responsible for the operational aspects of the school, and the board must make sure it does not engage in micromanaging the operational aspects of the school. So there are various levels that I think, to make sure a governing board is effective, at the very outset they have to understand what their roles are. With regard to the point you mentioned earlier, parents and students, I think for us it's really about, again, making sure the board is functioning the way it's intended to, designed the way it's intended to. We are certainly supportive of having, and it's not unusual for our governing boards to have parents. Some will even have students. But their role on the board is, as a member of the board, to be concerned about the overarching mission and the governance of the institution, not necessarily as an advocate for a particular point of view, even though they come as a student or as a parent. But they represent elements of the community, elements of the school that may not have the same voice represented by other members of the board.
Steve, turning to you, I mean, you have a lot of experience both in the UK and internationally here. In terms of the role of the governor, I mean, our schools face the choice of having a governing body populated by professional governors, skilled in business tasks, or local residents passionate about education and the school in question, or should it be a happy mix of the two?
Okay, well, first of all, can I just say it's great to be back in Dubai, and I remember having a conversation with Dr. Abdullah in 2012 about what work's starting off, and now look what it's achieved 4 years later. It's great to see fantastic progress. And just before I answer the specific point, I just want to say that we did some research in England this year to look at schools in the government schools that have gone from inadequate, according to inspection, to good or outstanding, one quick jump. And we looked at what the leaders and the governors were doing in those schools. And then we asked the leaders, the principals, now you've got your school to good, what are you going to do next? And nearly all of them said the kind of leadership needed to get us to great is different from the kind of leaders that got us to good. And then we said, well, what are the things you're going to do to make sure you're great, not just good? And the most important response we got was an even stronger governing body. An even stronger governing body to challenge my leadership and challenge our leadership and make sure that we're going from good to great. So I think the key point I want to make at the beginning here is to say I'm a big fan of governance, not just to prevent bad things happening, but to help great things to happen. Now, in answering your particular question, there are all kinds of different models, and I've seen all those models work. My own view is that the governing body should be chosen for their skills and expertise, because their role is to provide strategic leadership and to ensure that the mission of the schools is kept and to oversee the performance of the principal. But they must be passionate about community engagement. And if they don't have parents on the board, they should have ways of talking directly with the community and the parents to listen to the voice of the parents, and the same with young people.
Excellent. Dr. Abdullah, you mentioned there are so many reasons why we shouldn't be facing this. A bit like, as I said, when you look at the licensing and the inspection area, there are various complicating factors in terms of the Dubai school scene. You've got 188 schools now, you've got 17 different curricula, you've got people coming from different directions, if you like. You've got a legacy of governorship here in Dubai, with people approaching it in a different way. How should we look at that? How should we face that?
Well, I think we should unite all of those differences on the purpose of the school. So it really doesn't matter who owns it or which curriculum you are doing. I mean, the purpose of schools is to make education, well-being of the child better, prepare them for the future, and all of that. So if we sort of strip out all of these indifferences and focus on what's common, and that purpose would be the same in every school in Dubai, in UK, in the US, and in every country around the world. So we become more fit for a purpose rather than other things. So I guess, and from my experience working with the schools in here, I think if you ask a principal of why they get into the job to start with, they all agree on the same thing. And when we talk to parents from the 200 different nationalities, yeah, there's a lot of indifferences between them. But the thing is, when we ask is, do you want happiness for your for your children? Everybody agrees on that. So I think we have more that we can agree on, and they are very basics and very straightforward. And I think that would be my recommendation.
Okay. Barnaby, is it possible to be prescriptive about the sorts of skills that you're looking for a governor here? And in terms also of how long they fulfill that role as well? Should there be a time limit on that?
Yeah. Well, can I just take one thing that, from your previous question? I'm chairman of the Independent Schools Council in the United Kingdom, and we look after 1,300 independent schools, and most of those are not-for-profit and are really required to have a proper governing body. But there's a reasonable proportion that are for-profit, privately owned schools, and they do not have to have a governing body. But I can tell you that time and time again, we have found that those schools, if they don't have a governing body, or they don't have a set of external advisors, let's call them, those schools run into difficulties. Because it is extremely difficult for a private owner to keep track of all the things that are going on in the world of education, like changes to the curriculum, inspection, teachers' pay, appraisal, and 100 other things one could mention. And quite honestly, they're missing a trick, these private owners, if they don't bring in a small number of experts to help them. Now, you've asked me a question, who are those experts? Well, first of all, at the top of the list, I would say people who know about education. You cannot have a successful governing body without one or two governors who are experienced teachers, deputy heads, or heads, who know in detail what a good school looks like. You need someone who's got skills in finance, and those are the two principal groups. The other groups I've already mentioned, like law, human resources, building and estates, marketing and fundraising, those things are also desirable, but less essential. And then finally, on the question of tenure, yes, it is important that there should be a turnover of governors. You don't want to have the same governors for 20 or 30 years because you need an injection of new ideas. And quite frankly, those governors, send them off to some other school. Let them bring their ideas to another school, but bring in new ideas. So in the United Kingdom, the normal thing is to say that you're appointed for 4 years, sometimes 5, renewable once. So most governors will stay for 8 years and then they'll go, whether they like it or not. Of course, the challenge is finding replacements, because you could well argue it's better to keep a really good governor for 20 or 30 years if you can't find good replacements. But finding good replacements is part of the job of a governing body, and one of the essential subcommittees would be the nominations committee looking for future governors. So I would say 8 years maximum.
Okay, now looking at other areas where governance exists, obviously the commercial sector has existed for quite a long time. And I'll just throw this out to the panel. I mean, what lessons regarding good governance can education borrow from other areas, including the commercial sector? Yes, we've got to get up.
And I'd like you all to kindly stand up.
Okay.
So we're going to do a bit of stretching so that we can not just sit down and get our muscles all stiff. I'd like you all to stretch to the sky, just get the energy to your body. Stretch to the sky, stretch to the sides. Move your muscles around a bit. And lastly, hug yourself, because that's where you start off happiness, because loving yourself is the first part of happiness. Like you ought to hug yourself really happy. That's great, thank you.
Great, thank you. So Steve, now you're fully stretched. Would you like to take that question on about the good governance?
So the question is, what can we learn from the commercial sector? Well, first of all, I'm not sure that the commercial sector has covered itself with glory on many occasions. We've got all kinds of examples of bad governance in the commercial sector. Enron, Arthur Andersen, etc., etc. In fact, when I was studying leadership and management, we looked at case studies of where private sector companies went wrong, and in almost every case it was through bad governance and a failure to hold to account the chief executive and the leadership of the organisation. So, but what we can say is that in most cases, companies and businesses usually take governance seriously. They understand the importance of it, and they understand the need to recruit strong, expert people onto those boards, and they understand, on the whole, the importance of holding the executive to account. And when we see poor schools, it's almost always because there's a failure to hold to account. Either because the board are failing to hold the principal to account, or the principal is failing to hold the teaching staff to account. Now, that's not the only reason. There are all kinds of other things too, but that notion of accountability is really, really important. But I just want to add, it's not just the negative side. It's the support side. It's the wisdom side. It's the added value that you get from a good governing body that makes it so important too.
So there's an opportunity really for education to take the lead in governance, for education to set the bar on this. I mean, Cameron, from your experience in the United States, do you see other areas where we can learn from good governance?
Well, I do think that the whole purpose of this event that is being brought together today and has been for a few years around What Works is a great example of what can be done in the area of governance, as it is in every other part of education, which is to bring school heads and school governance organizations together to share best practices and share how their experiences at their school can provide an example to others. And it's something that we do in our organization as well. We have events, bring a lot of schools in and talk about what we do well. So I think certainly the idea of sharing best practices is a very valuable way that you can contribute to a higher level of performance. We really are in a commercial, I know maybe we don't like to think of that in terms of education, but when you have owner-driven schools, it is a commercial enterprise. So I think the delicate balance between the interests of the owner and the role of the board to ensure that the educational mission is conducted apart from some of the business considerations that the owner has to bring to bear really is an example of a very delicate but very important balancing act. And I think there probably are a lot of great success stories in the broader commercial sphere, but I think we read more about those situations where governance doesn't work very well. And I think we perhaps have an opportunity, since we're dealing with institutions where there is a mission, the owners engage in this process because they are committed to the mission, the public mission of an organization like a school. So it really is an opportunity to model effective governance in ways where more commercially focused enterprises may not.
Mm-hmm. Now, the governors typically, certainly in the UAE, are volunteers. They're people who are experienced business people, come from other sectors within the community. So they give up their time willingly, and they're obviously very busy people. Is there a question or is there a possibility that they should actually be paid for that role? Is that something that we should consider? Would you like to take that on?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think it's much better if they're not paid. I think you will only want to go down the road of paying governors if you find that it's impossible to get them in any other way. Obviously, it's far more satisfactory from the school's point of view if they're not having to pay governors. The trouble with paying governors is that you've got all sorts of questions about the amount of time that governors spend on the job, and you would find in any normal governing body there are some governors who spend much more time than others, and so questions of remuneration become quite complicated. And certainly the issue of paying governors has been raised in the United Kingdom because there was a shortage of governors, but actually it's really been rejected, and a greater focus is now being placed on trying to find volunteer governors, and I'm reasonably hopeful it'll be successful.
And in terms of training for them, I mean, effectively they're like non-executive directors, a governor. There are a lot of courses available for non-exec directors. Should these be open to governors as well? And if so, who should pay for them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the point to make is this, that in a country like the United Kingdom or the United States, where governing bodies have been going for generations, there already exist, several organisations whose job is to provide the paperwork and also provide the training. And so actually in the United Kingdom and the United States, it's quite easy for governors to get training. There are professional courses being laid on in all local authority areas all the time. And in a country where Dubai, where it's clearly less developed, this is something you may want to think about organising, because it's not too difficult, but it is essential. I mean, it is essential that governors understand the limitations of their powers, what it is they're expected to do, and that they're properly trained in things like, understanding school data, understanding the appointments procedures, understanding what happens if a pupil is being excluded from the school, what happens if parents complain, what about safeguarding legislation, looking after children. There are dozens of things where actually all governors need a degree of professional knowledge.
Okay. And turning to Dubai, close to home, a little over 80% of the schools here are for-profit schools, and that leaves us around about 18% or so which are not-for-profit. Should they be governed differently? Should school groups, for instance, large school groups, be governed differently than individual schools? Abdullah?
Not really. I think if we go back to the unified purpose, it's the same. And I think building on Barnaby's point, today we have some boards, and these boards, they are there like back home and wherever they come from. Usually, you serve for sometimes an honorary position, or sometimes a status or social purposes. And they existed this way in Dubai maybe for about 50 years or less. These roles are all good and fine with us, but I think going forward we need to see that your role in the board is a very serious job. It is a very serious job. Whether you pay it and you give it back to community, but you need to be responsible and accountable. From my experience talking to some, as you said, they are a volunteer, and sometimes, for example, we try to expand some of the non-profit schools. We've been at this for about a couple of years. And it's not a resistance per se, but it's a fear of, I've done great, wonderful school for 50 years. Why would we go and make another? Why we take the responsibility and accountability? Why should we? I said, I think you should, because if you don't, then you don't blame the prophet for expanding, for example. So I'm saying is, in the past, yes, we hear the volunteer and we hear all of this, but I think going forward, we're going to hold the system accountable to say, if you are a board of government, it is a serious job, whether for-profit or non-profit. It is, because in the past, there was no national agenda. So we were driven by various agendas. In the public sector, differently than the private sector. In the private sector, different agendas of bottom lines or social or whatnot. But today, and for the first time, this country had one single unified agenda. Do anything you want to do above and beyond this. So you gotta get this first. You get to anchor your effort to the national agenda. You don't meet that, we're all gonna be in trouble. Because it is, yes, it's great and wonderful to make those profits, but not on the account of this country not being in the top performing country. You get that first, we guarantee you're gonna get this, but not the other way around.
So when a school decides to embark on the good governance journey, so they decided, right, we need to improve our governance, where should their immediate focus be, and are there any potential quick wins that they should be aiming for?
Well, first of all, I'd say they should do a skills audit of what their expertise is as a governing body and a self-review of how well they're working. Secondly, I think they'll need to look at what outstanding governance looks like elsewhere. It's interesting that we now have a lot more sharing between school principals and between school teachers than there used to be. For example, through the What Works initiative here in Dubai, but also in lots of other countries too. But it's not that common for governors to observe governing bodies in other schools, to see great governance in other contexts. And I think that's, in England we introduced this concept of national leaders of governance, expert governors who would work with other governing bodies to coach them and help them to see what good and excellent might look like. So I think I'd certainly say they should look outwards as well as inwards, look at where there is great governance going on in other places, as well as doing self-review of their own expertise.
Okay. Cameron Barnaby, would you like to join on that?
I think I agree with what was just said, but I think that you want to look toward what are standards, what are expectations of good governance. There are standards out there. Obviously, as an accrediting organization, we have standards about governance. Other entities do. So I think I would first look to what are the benchmarks and the general principles around good governance, and have a discussion within your own school and among your own leadership about how you view those standards and those principles. How would you like to, as an institution, achieve those? What structure do you want to establish? And there are many models of good governance, but I think the principles remain pretty consistent. And then I do think going out and visiting schools, but I think you need to have some understanding first. What are the goals and what are the principles of good governance, and then how do we find good models that we can follow?
Okay.
Yeah, I would do three things. First of all, I would visit other good schools to see what they're doing, because there's absolutely no reason for anyone to reinvent the wheel. There are tens of thousands of schools out there with very good governing bodies. Secondly, I would write everything down. I would have a clear statement about what the governing body is for, how it's going to operate, what are the subcommittees, how often it's going to meet. You need to appoint a clerk who's going to take the minutes, send out the agenda, so certain structural things to do. And then thirdly, after you've been going for a year or two, I would get an external expert to come in and inspect you and tell you what you're doing right and wrong.
Excellent, great. I think it's time that we opened up the floor to some questions. I think we've managed to get quite a few very interesting views. I'm sure people are eager to put their questions to the panel. I think we've got two people with microphones who will come to you. Once they do come to you, if you could just identify who you are, and if you could make the question as brief as possible, that would be very helpful indeed, so we can get as many people in as possible. Do we have a question there? We can't see. So the people with the microphone are going to have to find them. No questions? Oh, you need a microphone. Okay. So yeah, just wait. The microphone will be on the way. Okay. There we go. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ahmed Tantash. I am the Vice Chair of First Education Holding, a company that invests in schools in the MENA region. One of our schools here in Dubai is Al Ma'arif School. And my question is, this is a great start of a dialogue that is music to our ears. But how do we take this further? I mean, these are private schools that have private owners. And in governing bodies, how do you balance between ownership and educational aspirations? How do you combine this governing body? Is there a number of people on this governing body? I've been on so many boards of public shareholding companies, of banks, and we've seen a lot of governance structures. The question here is, for example, Al Ma'arif is one of the oldest schools in Dubai. how do you progress? How do you provide the best education while making sure that you achieve your goals, your financial goals as an investment vehicle focused on education in the region? And then if you can give us a proposed structure of the bodies that govern the school, starting from the ownership to the governance body to the teaching structure, that would be highly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the question really about how this should happen, how it happens in relation to the owners as well. So the suggestion, and I think it's well known here that obviously owners have a very strong role, particularly in the private sector, and will get involved, perhaps sometimes too much, in the running of a school. So how do you actually practically deal with this sort of situation? Who would like to take that particular question?
I'll start.
Yeah.
So the first step is that the owner has to agree that it's a sensible idea to have governors or an advisory body, depending on, you can call them anything you like. If the owner doesn't agree with it, obviously it's not going to happen. But if they're sensible, they will agree, for the reason I gave earlier, which is that this is potentially free of charge expert advice which will improve and add value to their school. Secondly, you've got to clearly describe the relationship between the governing body and the owner, because if the governing body feels that the owner isn't listening to them, then they're soon going to be dissatisfied and the thing will collapse. So there has to be an understanding that the owner will agree with or will take close notice of the recommendations of the governing body. And precisely what the governing body is going to be looking at will have to be defined on paper. I mean, it would be perfectly possible, for example, to imagine that the governing body was there to monitor the performance of the principal and look at the standards in the school and have nothing to say about finance. That would be fine, at least that's clear. But what you can't have is any lack of clarity. So it hinges on that.
Okay.
Sure, I would just add, I do think that's, it's critical obviously that the owner embrace the concept, but I think it's also, part of the value is to have some other mechanism for accountability where you have, for the parents, for the community, recognize that it is not just a business. And I know that no owner of a proprietary school would say that it's just a business, but when you have an external independent organization as a board who has the governance role of sort of protecting the educational mission of the school, I think that also indicates that that is central to the school's operating, and that there's no business decision that will have a negative impact on the school that the governing body wouldn't have a role in working through. So I think it adds that extra benefit for an owner to provide that level of transparency to the school community.
Okay. Dr. Abdullah?
I think we're going to hear a lot about this private and government. We're going to hear a lot about it. And I need to make this statement. Yes, you are a private organization. You're owned by a certain individual. In that sense, you are private. But you are public when it comes to providing the goods. You are publicly responsible to provide the education that this country wants. Let's don't mix up those two. Yes, we do understand in the past we didn't have a set target agenda or ambition, but now we do. For the last 3 years, since the national agenda was set, every new school that opened up, their criteria was, you show us how you're going to make the national agenda, and we let you in or we don't. And that was been the process. For every 10 schools we open, there's a 40 who get rejected. But that's for the new, so it's also time to go back to the existing school and say, I have been here for all these years. As you said, I'm one of the oldest school. Great. I think you benefited very much from being around this country. It's time to give back. And there is no better way than providing the education that this country is setting the ambitions for.
Steve?
Yeah, I know from experience how frustrating it can be to be a governing body when there's a proprietor who's not listening. So I think what's absolutely clear is you need a constitution. and you need transparency about what is delegated to that governing body and what isn't delegated to that governing body. And everyone needs to be clear about that. I absolutely support what Barnaby said on that particular issue.
Excellent. Okay, do we have any more questions there? I think we've got a gentleman down the front. You've got the microphone there. Oh, we've got somebody here. We'll get to you in a second, sir. Sorry, could you speak up? Okay, have we got the microphone there? Can we just check if it's working?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Primrose Matthew. I'm the chair advisory board of the City School International. I just had, listening to the conversation, just had one question. Taking from the corporate sector, what do you think, or what would you advise are the two key principles for the governors, for the governing body, or the chair to follow in looking after the school?
Okay, so coming from the corporate sector, what would be, it's getting back to those lessons, I suppose, from the corporate sector. I think Steve stuck the foot into the corporate sector there, but it's, are there any things that we can usefully learn then from the corporate sector?
Well, just one key point here. I think the role of the chair of the board is really, really important here. In fact, I would say the most important role in a school is the school principal or head teacher, and the second most important role in the school is the chair of the board. And the relationship between those two is absolutely essential for a good governance. Seems to me that if it goes wrong when the chair thinks that they ought to be the head teacher and starts to interfere in the role of the executive and in the running of the school. Or it goes wrong when the head teacher thinks that they can wrap the chair of governors around their finger and they can do what they want and won't be challenged. And getting that balance right between trust and challenge is a key to great governance in the private sector and in the public sector.
Right. Anybody else want to take a question? Yeah.
So, I mean, just a few basic points. I would say, governors, avoid managing the school. Appoint a reliable chairman of governors. That's the most important thing. I totally agree. Ensure that you have written governance articles which describe exactly what the governors are for. Ensure you have an agenda that's sent out well in advance of every meeting. Have written instructions about the role and behaviour of your governors. Have a term-by-term plan of what you're going to discuss at your meetings. Have training for your governors. Have a clear understanding of the subcommittees you're going to have, because in addition to the main board of governors, you may have 2 or 3 subcommittees. Note conflicts of interest before any meeting in the way that any good board would do. Think carefully about how you're going to appraise the head teacher, which should be an important job of the governing body, and have an external review of how you're getting on every 3 or 4 years. I mean, these are principles of good practice.
Just one point, too, that I think that it's been implicit in a lot of what we've said, but I think one of the critical things about a governing board also is what they don't do. And they, in the accreditation visits we have where schools are dysfunctional, it is almost always related to their bad governance practices. And that may mean that the governing board is implicating itself in the decisions within the school, either directly or implicitly, and understanding that their role is not to micromanage, their role is to support the head, evaluate them, select them, hold them accountable to expectations, a strategic direction that the board sets, but step back and do not involve themselves in any way, shape, or form in the governance of the school. That's very challenging for many boards. And certain individuals on boards who perhaps have prior experience as a school head might feel that's part of their role. I think we've talked about transparency of the role of the board, and I think that's just a very critical element that the board understand where it should not go, despite its own expertise and its own opinions, that it respects its role versus the role of the school head.
Excellent, thanks.
I will give her my time.
I'm here again. I'm the well-being keeper, and I'd like you all to stand up once again.
We're up again.
This time we're going to do some other kind of exercise. We're going to jog on the spot. So let's try doing that. So jog on the spot. Feel the blood flowing through your body, and get, everybody have a smile on your faces. Make sure you enjoy this. And now let's all laugh out loud. To see louder, as loud as you can. Be as happy as you can in this day, and yeah, let's just show our happiness for being here. Thank you.
Great. So yes, we have the what to do and what not to do for governors. I think that was very useful analysis on that front. I think there was a gentleman down the front who I saw was looking to ask a question here. So if we could get the microphone to him as quickly as possible, just here in front of me on the right-hand side. Do we have the microphone? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, good morning. My name is Ammar Shams. I'm a governor at the Dubai English Speaking School and the Dubai English Speaking College, which is a not-for-profit based in Dubai. I've heard you speak about the need for variety of professions on the Board of Governors, which is all very good in terms of finance, HR, legal, and so on. I also think it's necessary, especially in an environment like Dubai, to have diversity of profiles, be it nationality, gender, age, because Dubai that's what makes it rich. It's wonderful in its diversity, and unless the Board of Governors is equally diverse, the student body won't benefit from that. It's just a comment rather than a question.
Yeah, an excellent point. Dr. Abdullah, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Ammar, and I think, you know, this is one thing we always said is great and wonderful about this place we call Dubai, that we have the 200 different nationalities, and you see them everywhere. So I think the point of, and we do this in the schools actually, we go to schools and we see the schools that has greater diversity when it comes into the students' body tend to actually be on a happier note, because they seems to be enjoying learning about each other. So I think, yes, true, and I think today the first question will be asked is to the existing boards, like yours, and see how are we doing in terms of diversity. I know of, for example, how Harvard and top Ivy schools selects their new intakes. They select them based on each and every one of them has to be different. You know, like a razor sharp. So I guess the point here is that's a good starting point to check in terms of all of these and use them, because you might not have that opportunity else in the world, but here you do at your disposal, so put it to a good use.
Yeah, I totally agree. The important thing is that the chairman of governors needs to have a list of all the things they're looking for, the skills and the types of people, and that would certainly include gender, ethnic diversity. Absolutely right.
Right. So unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we've run short of time. A very interesting discussion indeed. Before we wrap up though, I'd just like to go quickly around the panel, and if they could just give me a quick recommendation for governance. What would they like the audience to leave thinking about governance? I'll start with you.
So I would recommend that the governors think of a way that they can communicate with the teaching staff and the non-teaching staff in the school. For example, before each governing meeting, you have a cup of tea with the staff, because you don't want the distance between the governing body and the people who are actually doing the work to get too great.
Great.
My advice would be that you take a look at your governing structure right now, and I think, as we've discussed in various ways, clarity of mission, clarity of role between the owner, your governing board and your school head is absolutely critical. Make sure that your current governing process is well understood, well defined, and clear to all constituents.
Yeah, I think today was, as we started, was the first time we have this dialogue. So I know there is a lot of ideas, and I highly recommend them that, you know, they think inside of you for some times. And those ideas will strike you, will wake you up, will just take your mind somehow. So always entertain those ideas as they come to you. And I think there are two types of people today in the audience. Those who already have some sort of governance. And I think today could have been a good eye-opener for you to say, I had a good governance, or at least I thought I had a good governance. Now how can I make it great? And the other type of people we have that this is the first time to talk about governance. So I'm saying, welcome aboard and start where everybody else is today and learn from that.
Yeah, it sometimes feels quite intimidating to be a governor, because the teachers and the school principal seem to know far more than you do. But the key skill of a governor is not to know the answers, to ask the right questions. And being confident enough to ask the right questions seems to me a key starting point.
Great, many thanks. And I think we have a lot of food for thought. I hope, Dr. Abdullah, we've helped to begin the conversation. There's certainly a lot there. The panel will actually be around to discuss this further with you. In fact, Barnaby actually has a session after this where he'll talk about it in a little bit more detail. But before we wrap up, I'd like you to thank the panel here. It's Steve Munby, we have Cameron Staples, Barnaby Lennon, and of course Dr. Abdullah Karam.
Thank you, James, Dr. Stephen, Barnaby, Cameron, and Dr. Abdullah for a lively and engaging discussion today. As a token to our appreciation, we would like to present you with a small gift, Flashes of Thought, a book written by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, which highlights the important role of government in making the people happy and they serve happy. And before you leave the stage, we would like to take a selfie with the audience here. So if we can please come here to the front. Yes, and turn around. So can everybody please stand up and give a very big smile for the camera? Do you want them to